Hi guys, Jackie with Famished Farm, and we are back this week with 3 new recipes. We're still using our meal plan, and we're doing this every week so we can stick to a budget, and also because it helps us go through new recipes that I've had in my kitchen for over 10 years. In some cases, they might even be older than that. We're trying to cycle through those recipes so that we can find recipes to keep that will go into the weekly rotation, and others that maybe we just don't care for, so we can let those recipes go into the trash. First up, we made a potato, ham, and spinach frittata. Guys, this was very good, and it made enough for 2 different meals. Rod and I are intermittent fasting, so we don't eat breakfast. Anytime we can have breakfast for dinner, it's a win in both of our books. We like this recipe too because we could use some things in our kitchen that were on the verge of going stale. We have a bag of potatoes in the kitchen, and this recipe calls for 2. That's a good way to use them up. I also like this recipe because it called for spinach. In our case, we prefer kale. So, man, big win for the veggies on this dinner tonight. Our second recipe was delicious. It's an orange-sesame pork with Napa slaw. And I tell you, this one was a winner for both Rod and I. I don't use Napa cabbage that often. In fact, I usually buy the tricolor cabbage that's already pre-shredded. Use what you've got. I also didn't have boneless pork chops. I happened to buy bone-in, so we had to do a little deboning on this, but it worked out just fine. Our third recipe is Newfoundland Cod Cakes, and this is a great way to get some fish into your diet. I was a little disappointed the recipe didn't include all of the prep time that's necessary to make this. It calls for mashed potatoes. I didn't have any leftover mashed potatoes, and it called for steamed cod. I don't know anybody that keeps steamed cod in their fridge, but I had to do all that. The prep time on this was closer to an hour, but it was really good, and it made enough for 2 dinners. If you're liking our content, please like and subscribe. Which recipes do you make that are in your weekly rotation? Leave us a comment down below and let us know. Okay, let's get cooking. The recipe starts out with 2 small potatoes, and we're going to go ahead and peel those and thinly slice them. Now, I do keep a bag of potatoes in the summertime. Generally, I keep them just to make potato salad a couple times a month. The recipe also calls for a small onion. The onion here is more on the medium side, so I'm just going to use a part of that, but we're going to go ahead and prep the whole onion and then put it back in the fridge to be used later. All the peels go into my compost bin, and then we will go ahead and start cutting this onion up. We're just going to thinly slice both the potato and the onion. Oh, and you're going to want to make sure your oven is preheated to 400 degrees. And I've got a skillet on the oven that I'm heating up because we're going to be sauteing these. The recipe calls for 3 tablespoons of oil. We're going to use only 2 tablespoons in the pan to get these onions sauteing. And honestly, that was only about a tablespoon. So just to start, go less. I think you'll be just fine. And we're going to add those potatoes too. The recipe calls for cooking them both together, and we're going to just cook, tossing occasionally until the potatoes are tender, which it says takes 12 to 15 minutes. This is going to vary a lot depending on how thick you cut those potatoes. It took me close to the 12 minutes. Back over on the countertop, we're going to prepare 9 eggs in a large bowl. And I'm just going to use my Pampered Chef little whisk to get these all mixed together. And we're going to season with some salt. Guys, do this to taste. There is ham in here, so you may not need as much as you think. I always use lots of pepper though. And then there's my little whiskey thing going. Mix her up good. Over on the stove top, I can hear everything sizzling, so we're going to just get these moved around the pan a little bit so they don't stick. Okay, we'll finish stirring up these eggs, and then my family prefers kale over spinach, so we'll add our 10-ounce bag of organic chopped kale. Then our cheddar cheese, I don't have white cheddar. We're just going to use the yellow cheddar. Calls for a cup. I think I do quite a bit less than that. That was more like a half a cup there. And instead of the deli, thin sliced deli ham, this is just some cut up ham that I keep in my freezer. I'm weighing out a 4-ounce portion. I'm going to go a little over the 4 ounces because there is a lot of fat. I'm going to end up trimming off this ham. And back over to the potatoes and onions, just give those a quick stir. And then back over to the cutting board, and we'll trim up this ham and get it sliced. It calls to cut it into 2-inch pieces. Guys, I think I chop it much more than that. This is more like a dice maybe almost. Do you though, it doesn't really matter. And then we're gonna mix this up into the eggs. I'm gonna switch from my Pampered Chef whisk to my little spatula here, and we'll get everything incorporated well. Now back over on the stovetop, we're just going to add the egg mixture to the potatoes and the onions, and then we're going to stir this. It says to stir once and then transfer the skillet to the oven. We're going to cook them just until the eggs set, about 12 to 14 minutes. Once, maybe not, but we've got that mixed together. And again, this is going to go into our 400-degree oven. You'll notice all of the tomato mess is gone out of my oven, which if you saw last week's video, that was just coated with roasted tomatoes from canning. But here we go, nice clean oven. We'll see how long that stays. And we're going to cook, I think I set the timer to 12 minutes. But we did have to go longer. Now we're going to prepare our salad. We're going to do a tablespoon of the remaining tablespoon of olive oil, a tablespoon of red wine vinegar, 1 teaspoon of Dijon, and whisk that together. The recipe specifies 1 head of red leaf lettuce. I'm just using what I have on hand, and I'm also only going to do what I think we'll eat tonight. If there's a little left, which there was, we'll just add that to our salad we make for lunch tomorrow. Guys, I add some pepper to that just to punch it up a little bit. After mixing, I decide to add a little bit more lettuce. And then this is going to be the last time I stir this because I really do want the vinaigrette to settle to the bottom. That's going to be too much vinegar for this particular amount of salad. There it is, guys. When it comes out of the oven, it was beautiful. I mentioned at the top that this made enough breakfast for dinner for 2 nights, so that was excellent. It was very good. Rod and I both enjoyed it. We'll be making this again. And did you see how old that recipe was? From 2012. So yes, I do hang on to things for a long time, especially recipes I know what I think we'll like and I want to try. Here's another recipe I've been carrying around for about 10 years. But guys, this one was worth waiting for. It was absolutely delicious. We're going to start out with that bag, the rest of the bag of cabbage slaw. I don't know if I had 4 cups, but we're just going to use what we had. And I didn't obviously had Napa cabbage. That's just tricolor cabbage. Then the recipe calls for 2 navel oranges, and guess what? I only have mandarins. So I am going to go ahead and prepare one of those, but I am going to cut the little orange sections into 2. And then I'll add a teaspoon, not what the recipe calls for, of the sesame oil, half a tablespoon of soy sauce, and a shake of cayenne pepper instead of the red pepper flakes. Then we're going to prepare the other orange. We're going to squeeze that. I am going to reserve those sections and go ahead and throw them into the salad. The recipe, it doesn't really give you enough of the orange juice, so I'm going to end up taking some frozen orange juice out of the freezer. That is oyster sauce going in now, another shake of cayenne, and another teaspoon of sesame oil. And we'll mix that up. There's that frozen orange juice that's come out of the microwave, it defrosted. And then here's our pork chops. Notice the bone in. We'll trim the fat. And then Rod has got the grill going. He's going to go ahead and put these bone pieces on the grill, and we're going to use that grilled meat for a lunchtime. We will go ahead and chunk this up. It calls for half-inch thick, rather quarter-inch thick slices. Now, I will tell you, I would just go ahead and cut these into bite-sized chunks. Kind of annoying having to cut these slices while you're eating, so just chunk them up into bite size. We did have some of this pork left over too, so we added both the grilled pork and this Asian pork to our salads the next day. That was adding in 2 teaspoons of soy sauce, another shake of cayenne pepper, and then some cornstarch. And I'm just going to mix that with my hand. Oh, and guys, I remembered the rice vinegar. We're going to add that to our slaw mix. Over on the stovetop, we've started with our wok, and we're going to give a sprinkle of olive oil that is less than a tablespoon. And when it's hot enough, we'll add our pork and start stir frying. The recipe says use a cast iron or a wok, whatever you've got. And you're going to cook roughly on 4 minutes or until it's browned. And you will want to mix that around once it's browned, but wait about 2 minutes before you do that so it gets a nice sear on the one side. When your pork is done, you're going to go ahead and add that orange juice mixture. Then the juice mixture, you're just going to add that, stir it, get all the pork pieces coated, and you just want this to come up to temperature. It's going to bubble slightly. It takes only a minute or so. Stir fries are fast, guys. I'm notorious for forgetting things, so I'm going to go ahead and add the sesame seeds now. I just toasted the sesame seeds in the microwave. It took about 3 minutes in the microwave. I'll add those in now so I don't forget those later. I've also pulled some frozen rice out of the freezer, and we're just going to let that thaw, and we'll use this for dinner. It was delicious. Beautiful, simple, delicious. Doesn't get better in my book. I mentioned we had enough meat left for our salads the next day, and there was some of the coleslaw mixture left also, and I just used that for salad. It was great. So your cod cakes are going to take some prep time. You are going to need to either make or pull out of the freezer. If you've got some frozen mashed potatoes, you're going to need 2 cups of mashed potatoes and 1 pound of steamed cod. Now, could you use leftover cod? Probably. That's just maybe from a restaurant meal. Sure, I would do that in a pinch. But I had frozen cod, so I had to thaw it. And then we are using my extra large wok with a big canning ring down below, filled up to the rim of the canning ring with boiling water, and then putting a plate, and that's just a Corelle plate. This worked pretty good. You can see some of the water bubbled over into the fish. So it's more like poached, I guess, than steamed, but it worked out just fine. I would do this again. I think I might change the temperature that I did it on. I'm always going too hot on this burner. And there you see me kind of trying to tip the water out. Like I said, it worked in a pinch. If you have a bamboo steamer or other steaming contraption, be sure to use it. A Google search said that steaming cod will take 6 to 12 minutes. I honestly probably could have stopped at 6 minutes. I did go the full 12 minutes. It was a little overdone, but in these cod cakes, you're never going to know. Okay, then our potatoes are about done. And I did make a mistake on this recipe, guys. It calls for 2 cups of mashed potatoes. I didn't measure the potatoes once I mashed them, and I really should have. I didn't pay much attention to how many there were in the pan. So the recipe to me tasted like a potato pancake kind of deal, which we like. So don't get me wrong, it was good, but I just expected it to be more fish forward. And that was probably my fault. Either way, it's good. We'll make it again. Okay, and our timer has gone off for our cod that has now steamed, if not poached. Either way, it's done. It's ready. We'll just set that to the side on a plate and let that cool. Then the potatoes are finally done, and we'll just strain those and then mash them over on the countertop. A note to the recipe is that you can use leftover mashed potatoes, but realize they will produce a softer patty. Not sure about that because I did make fresh mashed potatoes. I'm guessing because you're adding milk and butter to your mashed potatoes, that may be why. And yeah, I should have measured there, but I didn't. Okay, we'll finish this up. We've got some onion. We're going to use just a small onion, or this is a quarter of an onion, and we're just going to chop this. And I'm just going to use the pan that I mashed the potatoes in as my mixing bowl. So we'll add this chopped onion to our mashed potatoes. And the onion that I didn't use, I'm just going to put that back in the fridge in the bag that it's in. And then I've grabbed 8 sprigs of parsley from the garden, and I'm just going to stem these and then roughly chop it. Then I've got 3 tablespoons of butter that I've melted in the microwave. I'll add that to our pan. And we'll need 2 eggs beaten also. I just add them to the pan and then just kind of slightly beat them on the side of the pan without getting a bunch of other ingredients in it. I think that'll be good enough. And then thoroughly mix. Now as I finish this, our cod is totally cooled off, so now I can kind of use my fork and flake that up. You'll see at one point there was a really tough portion that looked like it was a backbone of one of the fillets. I go ahead and pull that out because I didn't want that in my cod cake. And then we'll add this to the potato mixture. And one last mix. Get that all incorporated well. The next part of the recipe calls for 3/4 cup seasoned breadcrumbs. I'm using breadcrumbs out of my freezer that are not seasoned. So I'm going to use about a teaspoon of seasoned salt, a little garlic powder, and some pepper. And we'll just mix that all together. Guys, I forgot, I added just a little sprinkle of cayenne pepper also, then mixed it together. The recipe says to shape these into 3-inch patties. The only way I could think to do that without getting totally messed up is to use my ice cream scoop. These did make, though, a slightly bigger than 3-inch patty. I ended up with 7 cod cakes instead of 10, but I still would use this again in the future because it just is simple and it works without getting your hands all messed up. I'm just going to give these cakes each a little drenching of the seasoned breadcrumbs, and then be sure to flake off the extra breadcrumbs. That was one thing I noticed in the pan as these were cooking. I wish I had fewer burnt up bits in the bottom of the pan. So once you pat those on there, remove the excess, kind of dust off the excess breadcrumbs. Now, over in your pan, you want 1/3 cup of olive oil. I did not use 1/3 cup of olive oil. I used probably about 3 tablespoons. And you're going to bring this up to temperature before you add in your cod cakes. You are going to want to fry these about 4 minutes on each side, 4 to 5 minutes. And honestly, I did go 5 minutes. I really watched my temperature on this, so I kept this at a lower temperature. Again, this is my high heat burner that I often overcook things with. So I've got the temperature in check, and this is what it looks like after 5 minutes. Beautiful. And you're just going to want to do batches. These were pretty big, so I just did 2 at a time till I got to the last set of 3, and they were a little bit smaller. So they worked beautifully. And guys, how delicious was this? Now the recipe notes say that this is authentically served with baked beans. My husband ate some baked beans along the side, but he requested not to do that again. These were good though. They'll go into the rotation. So Bertie, who wrote this recipe, I just wish the actual time to prep the dish was more accurate than the 25 minutes listed. This took me 1 hour and over a minute. So that is a lot different than 25 minutes. Accurately show the prep time with ingredients the way we keep them in our refrigerator. Do I normally have mashed potatoes in my kitchen? No. Do I have steamed cod in my kitchen? No. So that's my only problem with this recipe, is that it was not accurate when it comes to the prep time. Otherwise, it was delicious. Thank you, Bertie. Guys, I appreciate you being here. Please check us out next week. We'll have some more recipes as that recipe stash gets smaller and smaller.